You have ever seen the TV show Dance Moms? I mean, hi, hello, the pyramid. Hey dancers, it's Kirsten. Welcome back to the Confident Dancer YouTube channel. And also welcome to any teachers who might be watching as well. As you've seen in the title, this one is geared towards teachers, also helpful for dancers to listen to as well. What I'm talking about today is a part 2. It's a follow-up to the last video I made, which was normalized behaviors in the dance world that are really unhealthy for dancers. I focused on behaviors that dancers often do or believe are good that are actually really unhealthy for them. In this video, I'm going to talk about unhealthy behaviors that teachers can sometimes exhibit, or I've seen them as common themes in the dance world that are really unhealthy behaviors for themselves, and also especially it's very unhealthy for the dancers that they are leading and hopefully nurturing and guiding instead of harming. So I want to point all these out. Of course, it's not going to be an exhaustive list, so if you have anything you'd like to share in the comments, please do. And also know that it is not my heart at all to just complain or vent or tear people down or pretend that all dance teachers are like this. I want to honestly say that the more I have gotten experience as a teacher, I think I've been teaching for like 7 or 8 years now. Every year I've become more and more humbled in knowing that I am a flawed human being who is doing their best, but who comes in. Sometimes I'm tired. Sometimes I get frustrated with students and then realize that I should have been more patient. I should have controlled myself more instead of maybe being sharp with a student. I make mistakes, and that's why I say the more I get experience as a teacher, the more I become humbled, because the more I learn that it's my job to take responsibility for the outcomes I'm seeing in the classroom. And yes, it is the dancer's job to receive my teaching and to work. I cannot make them. I technically can't really make them do anything. I can have a lot of influence, but I can't make a dancer into something if they're not willing to put in the work. I understand that it is a two-way street here, but I just want to give this disclaimer to say I have a lot of grace and compassion for dance teachers out there who might be watching this, and you do have the intention to really love and serve and help your students, but maybe you listen to the things that I share and you're like, dang it, I do some of that stuff. That's normal. And then there are going to be some teachers who really should watch this video because they're doing all this stuff completely unashamed and they think they're justified in doing it, and they're not going to watch this video, which is so sad. But anyway, I just want to share that's not my heart to criticize, but rather to point these things out to say like, hey, we can do better. We really can, even though I know this is a really hard job. And for dancers listening, I'm also, in what I just said, I'm not making literally any excuses for any of the horrible behavior that you have been on the other end of from certain teachers. I have experienced abusive behavior, and I do not say that lightly. I have experienced abusive behavior from several ballet teachers before, and I was only able to identify that it was abusive in hindsight. So also know, for the dancers listening, I don't take these things lightly, and I'm not making excuses for anybody who really needs to be talked to or plain old shut down if they keep being talked to and nothing changes. I'm not one for cancel culture. I know this intro is getting really long, but I do take this seriously, and I want you to hear the nuance with which I treat this subject. But yeah, I'm not one for cancel culture, but I do think some people really need to just stop teaching because they got a lot of their own inner work to do, and no one needs to be the guinea pig in that process. Anyway, shall we get into the first point? I think it's time to do it. So the first really unhealthy behavior that I see as normalized amongst teachers in the dance world is infantilization. If you don't know what that is, I'm going to read a definition to you from Dear Wikipedia. Infantilization is the prolonged treatment of one who is not a child as though they are a child. Studies have shown that an individual, when infantilized, is overwhelmingly likely to feel disrespected. It can even feel dehumanizing. And man, how often have I felt dehumanized as a dancer by certain directors, teachers, choreographers, so on and so forth. And I have talked to many peers and also worked with many clients who would say those words exactly. So basically, now that you know what infantilization is, the way I see it showing up is especially, I'm going to say it's really obvious in the professional world, because in the pre-professional ballet world specifically, when adult teachers are actually working with children, I'm not sure it's really fair to say that you're infantilizing them because they are a child. I think that goes against the definition of infantilization, but rather, you know, maybe they're treating them with disrespect, okay? The same teacher starts working in a company and they're working with adults, but they treat the adults like children. Okay, and the way this shows up, I'll give you some personal examples. Having a teacher literally take my bun and like pull me around to put me in on my mark, that's tremendously disrespectful. I felt like as an adult I was being treated like a child. You know, when a teacher just has it in their mind that they're going to ask a question, but it's really rhetorical, and no matter what any dancer says to show that they understand the concept the teacher is talking about, the teacher has it in their mind that you're wrong. Everyone is wrong. They're the only one who could be right. It's just like really, really demeaning behavior that's obviously like on the worst end. It's like behavior that makes even adults who are professionals, or adults who are not professionals, but they dance recreationally. That's just as valid, by the way. You don't have to be a professional to be valid as a dancer. I just always like to reiterate that message. But what I've seen is that teachers or directors can treat adult dancers like they can't think for themselves, like they don't know what they're talking about, like they can't have a voice, like they can't have needs. Like the teacher or director resorts to being a despotic in their behavior, which basically is like a dictator, kind of being totalitarian in the way that they run the room of dancers. Like no one can talk, everyone has to do exactly what I said, even if it's unreasonable, and even if the teacher or director is wrong about something, I said what I said, how dare you speak against me? Obviously this goes under the greater bucket of disrespect, but there are examples of infantilization. I think it's really just good to know about as a teacher and as a dancer, to say like, okay, we need to look out for this. Are we treating even children as much younger than they actually are? Are we treating adults like children? Are we treating our dancers as if they really are human, or are we dehumanizing them in minor or major ways? I think obviously this is a can of worms. It's a complicated subject, and I desire to speak about this in as much nuance and understanding as possible, but there's only so much I can do in a YouTube video that people are actually willing to watch. So I'm just going to leave that point there. The next normalized behavior in dance amongst teachers that's really unhealthy is teachers not doing their own inner work in repeating toxic generational patterns just because that's how they grew up doing it. Oftentimes what I've noticed is that when teachers are like, oh, you guys think you have it so hard now, we danced with holes in our point shoes. It's like, okay, maybe the teacher is trying to give perspective. Honestly, raising my hand here, because I do things like this sometimes. I try to be thoughtful about it. But sometimes when I feel that my students are really lacking perspective and I want them to understand that they are strong and that they are capable and that there's a difference between embracing healthy discomfort for the sake of growth and glorifying rejecting your needs, pushing way too far past your physical, emotional, and mental boundaries when it's not healthy. There's a difference. But sometimes when I want to help students have perspective, like, hey, you are capable, I try to frame past examples of hard things my teachers used to encourage me to do. I try to, number one, point out healthy examples. I try to not even repeat the unhealthy ones when appropriate. And then number two, I try to frame it in a way that's like, I'm telling you guys this because as a student, I once thought that I was just bad at XYZ step. I just thought I was not flexible, but then I had a teacher push me in this way and it actually really helped me to see my potential. I try to frame things in that way so that dancers can see like, hey, perspective, you're capable of more than you think. But the way this is done in a toxic way in the dance world is when there are those examples that teachers will give of like, yeah, my teachers only let us eat lettuce. And they talk about it like it's a good thing. Okay, the examples you share and the way you frame it as a teacher is so important, because whether you think you're doing it on purpose or not, you are endorsing that behavior. okay, when you repeat it a certain way. And yeah, sometimes we want to give our dancers perspective, like I said, but there's a way to do this in a way that you are not promoting behaviors that should be left in the past, okay? I will say some teachers or directors, like the ones who are, I think, are blatantly very toxic in the way that they lead. And when I say blatantly, I mean like also widely regarded as such by the people who are actually dancing under their direction. One thing that's common there is that it also seems that whenever they mention stories from their past and they're like, you guys have no idea how hard it was back then, and I'm going to give you a taste of that now, it's also an ego thing for them. Like it makes them feel so much better and so much more important than these wimpy dancers who can't get it together. And I just think really, no matter if you're a dancer or a teacher, we all need to have a look out on our egos and make sure that they are put in their place. The third really toxic behavior I've seen that's being normalized often in the dance world is shaming students for having feelings, especially in intense pre-professional and professional environments. A lot of teachers feel very justified in saying like, hey, you can't cry in class, hey, you can't cry in rehearsal, so on and so forth, because maybe you as a teacher or that person has had an experience where that literally was not accepted in the company that they were in, and they know their student wants to be in a professional company. So it's maybe with good intention that the teacher is like, hey, you can't bring that into class, because they have this perspective that that will harm their student's future career. And so it's not always with bad intentions that this is done. Also, there's balance to this. I personally do not believe that we should model for our students that they can fully and immaturely express whatever they're feeling and subject everyone to that. Like, there's a balance here. Like, we need to model for our students the nuance of not shaming them for their emotions and understanding we all do have hard days. We are not robots. We have ups and downs. So I think it's important to model acceptance for that humanity, but also, when necessary, set boundaries or have communication around, like maybe walking up to a dancer who is clearly really in tears because they're so hard on themselves or they're going through a hard time. In that situation, I think teachers and directors need to be attuned. Does that dancer seem to really be going through something? Or is it a dancer who, no matter their age, some people do really inappropriately bring their mood into the studio and they act hostile, or just obviously they bring this really, really dark cloud energy that's truly uncomfortable to be around. That is unprofessional. There's nuance in this, you guys. And so this video is not prescriptive. It's something to really seek out for yourself if you're a teacher, to try to maybe pull that dancer aside and have a conversation with them, like try to understand what's going on. Certain students, I understand, like they need to have boundaries set, like, hey, you can't bring certain behaviors into this room because it is affecting the other dancers in such and such way. For example, stomping their feet on the ground when they're mad at themselves, like just kind of hostile behavior like that. But there's this balance of, like, sometimes it's taken to such an extreme where directors or teachers, choreographers make it to where you absolutely have to be a robot. You cannot express any emotion whatsoever, and if you are, you're humiliated, you're called out, you're put on the spot, you are talked to passive aggressively, like not directly. That's something I experienced when I was having an extremely hard day, and I've experienced teachers like not even looking at me while they say it, but they're kind of like this, and they're like, you can't bring your mood into the studio. And it's like, they had no freaking idea what was going on in my life at that point. That was like really, really rude to say that. And they could see, if they really looked at me, that I was doing my best to like go in the corner and like really try to calm myself. But it sometimes, like, you are just a person and like you can't, okay? I get it. Teachers really need to treat that with care and sensitivity instead of black and white rules. That's going to create a lot of shame and humiliation, and also making the students feel worse and worse rather than resolving whatever's going on so that we can all move on. The next really toxic behavior I've seen normalized in the dance world is teachers comparing dancers and pitting them against each other, overtly or covertly. So some different ways this can look. I mean, the classic example is if you have ever seen the TV show Dance Moms, I mean, hi, hello. The pyramid. If you don't know, the show, I mean, obviously it was dramatized for reality television, like it's really obvious for entertainment factors. I think I heard something like that Abby Lee doesn't actually do the pyramid in real life. It was like for the show. I don't know, can't verify that personally, but there was this pyramid where every week I think the dancers were like ranked, like how well they're doing in comparison to the other dancers, and so everyone wanted to be the top. So anyway, this is a really obvious example of like comparing dancers against each other. One way that I actually saw this in my own life is a teacher, like when I genuinely was trying so hard to apply her correction to improve my jumps. I was trying so hard. And she had another dancer who was really good at jumps. Like, she had me stand and watch as this dancer did the jump combo by herself, and then made me do it with her, this girl who was really good at it, in front of the whole class. And it's like, okay, my ego wasn't permanently scarred by that, and it's okay if you think that's fine. Personally, I thought, like, okay, truly all I need is time. Like, I really get the point, and we didn't need to be, like, put together like that. That's kind of a lighter example. But I've also seen this in teachers or directors creating hostility amongst dancers by also, this is something I actually experienced, doing things like, there's like a traffic jam in a certain quarter ballet piece. One teacher I had would like stop the music and say, "Who did that?" And she would make the other dancers say who did it. And I can tell you, as a person who was the object of that a couple of times, it's just like encouraging competitive, hostile behavior towards the dancers, or saying things like, "Why aren't you more like this dancer? It would be so much better if you were like them." It's just, I think sometimes teachers will say things to try to motivate or really get the message through, but sometimes what a student needs, and I've learned this as a teacher, it seems wrong, but I've actually seen it, is sometimes the student has received all the information and they just need time. They just need to feel like they're allowed to mess up. They just need to not be looked at for a second and have a chance to work it out. Or if it's a more difficult correction that takes time to build the strength to implement, they need time. So yeah, putting them on the spot like that, or comparing dancers, or constantly putting pressure, it can actually work against their progress. The next thing that is really unhealthy that I see some teachers doing, it's kind of normalized, is only paying attention to students who have potential. Okay, there's a lot to this, but what I will say is what I do think should be the black and white rule, really, if I was like the queen of the universe, here's how it would be. If a student is paying tuition just like anybody else, it is literally your obligation as a teacher to nurture that student towards success just as much as the one who has potential. Hot take. I don't think it's really a hot take, but some people might think it's a hot take, all right? I mean, I personally had teachers that I really loved a lot who thought that way, and I was the beneficiary of them thinking that I had talent. So did I enjoy that? Yes. But still, I saw how it had affected some of my friends who were like, I'm paying and literally going into college debt to be here, and I really want to succeed. And I feel like just because of the way my body looks, they gave up on me. That's not fair, and I think we need to just stop doing that. The last toxic trait I want to mention in today's video that I see amongst dance teachers is using fear to motivate students. And this can come out in so many different ways, like threatening to take something away, like a role, or threatening to have them do like exercises or something as punishment. Also, it comes out in more insidious ways, such as espousing really rigid beliefs about the way the dance world works to their students in order to create fear so that they're motivated to work harder. Here's the way that actually works, if you're just confused by what I said. I've experienced this and worked with a lot of clients who've experienced the same thing, where they'll have a teacher in their young teenage years say things like, if you can't do 6 hours of point work a day and feel fine about that, then just forget even trying to be a professional. And they'll do these things, and it's like, there is some truth to that. some truth to that, but it also completely lacks nuance. Like, you're not expected to be professional level at 14, okay? And like your body's still developing, right? So maybe that's not healthy for you. Or ignoring the fact that some of the dancers in that class maybe want to go into smaller companies where the physical demands aren't as intense. Or maybe thinking about how I've talked to many dancers and have friends in top companies, and that yes, sometimes depending on your rank and how well casted you are in the company, sometimes you will be on point almost every day for 6 hours. But what I noticed in my own journey as a professional and amongst literally all my friends is that there are times where that's true, and then even certain days of the week where you'll have a 6 hour day and then like a 1 hour rehearsal block after class. And there's a lot of variability. Obviously, that depends on where you live in the world and what your repertoire or your season looks like. But, you know, just sharing beliefs like that, or one teacher I had was like, when I was in a company, if we sat down, we would get fired, even to stretch. You know, it's like, okay. I think she was saying that to inspire fear so that we're motivated to work harder. But it just ends up really getting in students' heads and really making them scared and stressed and feel pressure. It promotes perfectionism. And it's like, okay, on one hand, as a teacher, if you're trying to prepare students for a professional career, education and awareness of what they will be expected to do is obviously critical. But I do think as teachers, we also need to acknowledge the nuance and present it more factually instead of like fear mongering. I just don't think it's very helpful. So anyway, dancers and teachers, people of the world watching or listening on the podcast, I hope that this was helpful. I hope it was eye-opening. Please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Keep it nice if you don't mind. And yeah, I will see you in the next video. Bye. That pause was really weird, but anyway, that's it. Okay, bye.